Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about how to create a player health variable and a player health bar and display them both in the HUD so that when your player is getting damaged by enemies he can die. And that way you can have, different levels of difficulty for your player to deal with inside of a level. So first up, let's take a look at what's actually going to happen. So when I push play here, the game starts and you have 100 health on your HUD there and a green life bar. And so these things in the level are just random things that you might encounter, like you fall into a pit of lava or a bullet hits you or whatever. So when we hit these, they're just set up to be 10 points per damage. So it goes from 100 to 90 to 80 and then so forth and so on. And as you get to a certain color, or excuse me, a certain amount of health, you want to stress that you're really hurt, so you're going to change the color of the bar as well. And then if you keep getting hurt even more, you're going to tell the player, hey, you're almost dead, be really careful, go get some health, save the game, whatever. And then, if it gets to 0, they die, and visually they don't have any more health as well. Okay, so to do this, let's take a look at what we have. So first we've got a ground that we're walking on. Okay, and we've got our little enemies. They're just cubes, no big deal. But what we did on these enemies is over here under tags, we created a new tag by hitting the add tag button, and we just typed in the word enemy in lowercase. And what we're doing in the code is we're saying if the player touches anything with the enemy tag, do damage to it. And the damage is in the form of, minus 10 points to the health. So then we have a light, just so we can see what we're doing. And we have the player. Okay. Now what else do we have that you can't see? We have the player health bar, which was the green one that you saw. We have the health bar border or background, which was the black one you saw. And then we have the HUD, which was the numbers, right? These are just names that we gave them. Okay, the player health HUD has text in it that starts off as 100. Okay, so the player health bar and the player health border, you can see that that is a GUI texture. To get that, you just go to Game Object, Create Other, GUI Texture. And there's 2 of them. The player health HUD, you can see, is a GUI text. Again, you just go to Game Object, Create Other, GUI Text. So when it came to actually placing the items where we wanted them, Unity is actually pretty cool. You can update Unity on the fly as you're going. So when I press play, I can actually see the HUD on the screen, and what I can do is I can then go over and I can adjust things. So for example, on the player health HUD, if I want to change it, I can come over here on X and drag it, and it's going to update that number. And you can see that the 100 is bouncing around. What's going on is my code is actually keeping the 100 in place so that when I scale my screen for mobile development, it always changes and stays in the same spot. I have it doing it on the horizontal and the vertical. So you can see that the 100 is moving when I drag these numbers around, but the code itself does snap it back into place. The health bar is the same. On the health bar, when you push play, you're going to come over here and drag these numbers to get it where you want it. Now when you press stop, all of those things that you did disappear. Unity does not update anything that you do while you're playing the game. And if it did, it would cause huge issues for anyone making games, because we like to change things, then we forget what we did, and it just crashes the system. So what you need to do is, while you're playing the game, you can adjust these numbers, but take note of them, write them down in a text document or something so that you have them for later, so that you know exactly where you want your health bar border, and your HUD. Okay. Now keep in mind, what I'm showing you here is just one way to do a basic health bar and HUD. There's 1,000 different ways to do it, and this is one way using GUI text and GUI textures. There's other ways to do it using game objects and custom scripting and all these crazy things, but this is just a basic default thing that you can do to kind of get it in there. Okay, so again, in the GUI text for the player HUD health, we are going to set the text to 100, and that's going to be our starting value. Now, we do not need to use the starting value, and I'll show it to you in a second what we're doing, But I wanted to do it this way just so I could show you an interesting way to do it. The health bar and the health bar border, you'll notice they have a texture. Okay, this texture here is just a blank white square. You know, you can just open up Photoshop or GIMP or Illustrator or Microsoft Paint, whatever you want. Just create a small little square. Basically what we're doing is we're using web design principles. In web design, when you're on the internet, if you see a solid background on a website, or even a picture that's duplicated multiple times, what a lot of website developers do is they take a 1 pixel by 1 pixel square image that's just one color, and then they just tile it like crazy all over the background. So 1 pixel is really small and really light. It's like 1 byte. Whereas a huge picture, a digital image, could be 5 megabytes or something. So what I've done is I just took one that's 64 by 64 pixels, because that's a basic video game texture size, and also so it's small, and I'm basically using that as the texture for my health bar. And then in these, I am picking the color that I want it to be. So this one's the green one, and this one's the black one. We're also affecting the color through code, and we'll get to that in a minute as well. So what we did is we have the first-person controller, and we took the player health code. It's just a C# script that we wrote, and we just took the first-person controller and we drug the player health code onto it, because the player is the one that needs the code that is going to die and has the HUD and all that kind of stuff. So what the code is going to do is it's going to open up all these little extra spots here. You can see we have a spot for the player health HUD, so you would just grab that and drag it over. Grab it and then drag it over. We have one for the health bar and for the health bar border, so we take the health bar and put it there, and the health bar border and put it there. And you can see we have a little script node here to show you it's a script, a little T for GUI text, and a little square here for GUI texture. So let's take a look and see what's going on. So in our C# script, first up, we created all of the variables that we needed. Okay, so we have a private variable that's an integer or a whole number, and obviously it's the player health, and the player health is at 100. It kind of makes sense, right? Most games on the planet use 100. So it is private because we don't want anybody messing with it. We want all the health stuff contained in this script, and we don't want anyone else referencing it under any circumstances, so it is private. Variables are automatically private, but we just wanted to stress that we don't want the health to be hit or adjusted or messed with in any other shape or form. Now again, this is just one example. Some people put player health codes in all kinds of different places, so it just depends on how you're setting up your code. Again, it's just a number. So then we have those slots. If you remember, we had these slots here for player health HUD, player health bar, player health border, right? This code here, making it public and saying, I want whatever you put in this public slot in the editor to be GUI text, and then these two to be GUI textures. So we called the GUI text one player health HUD, and the other two health bar and health bar border, which is the same name as what we're doing, which also calls it the same thing here. And it's pretty cool that Unity puts little spaces in between them, just for easier reading and whatnot, I guess. And so it all matches up so we can understand what we're doing. Then we set up a temporary scale. This is for the health bar, and the green one, not the black one, the green one. And the reason why we did this is because your health in life and in video games is always temporary, right? It's always adjusting. You're either sick or you're healthy. You got shot by a bullet and you lost 25 points, or you're 100%. So the variable is just an integer, a whole number, and it's temp scale. Now, if we were doing something to where, you have like a poison arrow hit you and it does 0.035 points of life, then we would turn this into a float. And it would look something like float temp scale equals 100.00f. That's how we would do that in C#. But again, in this example, we're not using floats, we're just using whole numbers because all of our damage in our level is doing 10 points of damage. Now, when it comes to doing things like that, you definitely want to talk to systems designers or think about the systems that are going on inside your game. And you want to balance that the best you can so that it's hard enough to and really have fun and enjoy it. And you're going to have to tweak these numbers constantly. You know, does this enemy A really do 10 points, or is it 10% of damage? Does enemy B do 9.3 points of damage or 9.4? It really depends on what kind of game you're making, and that's really hard to balance. So you're going to have to just dive into that and figure it out for yourself in your own game. So again, we have enemy damage set up to do 10 points of damage every time, no matter what it is in the game. All the enemies with the enemy tag do 10 damage, just to make this easy. Then we have our onGUI function. The onGUI function makes the HUD appear. You can't do any of this, the health bar or the health, using a GUI text or GUI texture without the onGUI function. Now, if you're using a game object and you have all these weird things going on with actual 3D elements that are, you know, up in the top left corner of your game, you don't need the onGUI. But if you're using GUI text and GUI textures, you do need them. Okay? So, what exactly are we doing here? Well, the onGUI is going to do a couple things. You can see that it's changing the color to green, to yellow, to red. It's doing some weird screen width divided by 3. You know, which is centering it and all this kind of stuff. We're doing pixel offsets. We're changing this to black. We're creating new rectangles. There's also all these crazy things that we're doing. So let's start big and work small. Okay. So we know that the onGUI is just showing us the GUI, showing us the HUD, right? So all the code here is doing is just representing all the data that we're giving it. The green bar, the black bar, and the number is just representing that data. That's all it is. All the other calculations are happening here on when we actually hit the enemy in the trigger enter. Okay? So what we're doing is we are just presenting this to the player. Okay? So let's take a look. If you remember, the temp scale was the scale of the green bar. So we're saying here, as long as the green bar is greater than 0, do something, okay? And so as long as we're alive in the game, right, do this code. Else, right, else, if we're dead, what do we want to do? Do this, right? So when we played the game, what happened when we died? Well, the green bar turned yellow, and then it turned red. Well, it started green, then it turned yellow, then it turned red, and then it disappeared, right? In actuality, the bar didn't disappear, it just went to a size of 1 instead of 100, and then we just turned it black. Okay? And the reason why we're doing that is because if we do this here, if we physically destroy it in the game, then it completely disappears from our game, and we can no longer use health pickups. So in your game, if you have something that gives you a +10, you can't really +10 it to get it back to green if it's not actually there. So in essence, what we're doing is, if your life is at 0 or less, we're just setting it to 1 instead of 0, right? And because 0, you can't have an object that's 0, it doesn't exist. And then we are setting the color to black. That way it disappears into the black background. So let's take a look. This health bar, where's that at? Again, up here, we have the GUI texture health bar. So that's the green one, starts off green. And we're using pixel inset, so let's find that. Let's go to the health bar. Pixel inset. You can see that pixel inset is the X and Y location to where I put it in my level on my screen, and then the width and the height. The width is set to 100 because that's our total life, right? And then the height was 10. We could put that to whatever number we want to make the health bar really fat or really skinny, okay? So in that, let me scale this down a little bit here. So if we are adjusting the pixel inset to 1, right, on the width there, right, that means that we are no longer at 100. We're dead, right? So where's this color? Health bar, GUI texture, color. So we have the health bar selected, and then we're under GUI texture, color, and we're setting the color to black. The color.black is something that's already programmed into Unity. I believe there's color.black, .red, .yellow, .green. I think there's a .magenta. You can look those up in the Unity script references, or you could actually go in and dive into the RGB values and hex code values and things like that. These are just basic colors to show you what you can do. Okay, so let's say you're not dead. What's actually happening when your health is above 0? Well, let's take a look here. This is what this is. So first up, if the player's healthy, right, meaning green, we're going to say if your life, your temp scale, right, and we should probably say temp life instead of temp scale, but that's fine. So if the temp scale, if the size of the bar is greater than 60, because we set the width to 100, right? If it's greater than 60, the health bar GUI texture color, set it to green. So we're already starting with green anyway because you start off healthy. If the player's hurt, let's go to yellow, right? So if your the scale of the bar is less than 60 and greater than 20, be sure to have the two and signs. If the scale of the bar is less than 60 and greater than 20, set that color to yellow. And then if the player is almost dead, we're going to change it to red. So if it's less than 20, greater than 0, set it to red. Okay? Again, this is just updating the appearance of the GUI. So down here, this is why the GUI text and GUI textures were flickering when I was moving the pixel inset. If you remember, I said that I wanted it to fit on different smartphones, so I wanted it to scale naturally, right? So when it comes to pixel insets, there's a certain way to write it out inside of C# and Unity. We would love to do, x equals screen width divided by 2 and whatnot, but you have to do what the code tells you to do. So in this example, we have to do a dot pixel inset on the health bar, and we have to basically create a new rectangle every single time. And we're okay with that. I mean, it's a little bit much on the draw calls and takes a little bit of processing more than we would like, but in this example it works. So basically you have the width, the height, and then the scale and the scale, right? So the x, y, and then x and y again. So the horizontal location is going to be the screen width divided by -3. And we're doing a negative number because over here on that pixel inset, it's a negative number. That way we just get a negative to push it to the left. The screen height divided by 3 because it's a positive number. And the 3 is just some random number. It could have been 4, it could have been 2. It all depends on where you want your HUD to be placed. Again, we are adjusting that green bar based on the scale. So the X scale is going to be the temporary scale. And then we always want it, no matter what, to be 10 high or 10 thick on the health bar, right? So then we have the border, the health bar border. Same thing, just copy pasted, right? Because it's in the same exact spot. However, we always want the health bar to be 100. Okay, so if you remember, when we dive in here to play this, and we get hurt, that black bar always stays the same length, right? We always want that to be 100, no matter where we move this, right? No matter what we're doing, okay? So then we have the health, right? The player health HUD, the actual numbers, GUI text, pixel offset. So player health HUD, GUI text, pixel offset, again, negative number. So we are going to do that by a negative number. Now in this case, we needed to use a float value because 2.5 worked much better than 2 or 3. That way we got the 100 right above the health bar there where we wanted it. It actually looked a little bit better below it, but it's fine. So to do the float, we had to do a decimal, a 0, and then an F, and that's for C#, okay? You just have to do that. So again, on the GUI, we're just updating all the stuff that needs to be updated based on our data. So what exactly is the data? Well, let's take a look. When the level starts, we want stuff to happen. Okay, so what are we doing here? We know that the player health is a variable that we declared up here at the top. Player health equals 100, and it's an integer, right? So what exactly are we doing? We're saying, okay, take this integer of player health and let's parse it or change it into an integer, which we already knew it was an integer up at the top, right? So what exactly is going on? Well, let's take a look. Let's look at player HUD health or health HUD dot text. So player health HUD, which is our GUI text, right? So we do dot text is 100. Well, that's interesting. So we have player health, which is an integer, and we have this that's text. Well, what happens when it comes to programming is an integer is not text, and text is not an integer, right? Text is a string. So what we have to do is we have to turn that string, which is text, into a number. So to do this, we can say int.parse, and then use two parentheses and put our text inside of it. So what that's saying is, turn this text into an integer. And now this variable is saying, hey, I'm an integer and I need an integer, and I understand that your integer is this, which happens to be 100. So what it's doing is, when I push play and the level starts, it gives me 100. Okay? Now obviously we don't need to do it that way. We could have just said, player health is 100, and then down here when the level starts, we could have just said, wherever it's at. It's somewhere here. We got to go back to our GUI. Don't forget that, because that's where the GUI stuff is. We could have just said over here, the player health HUD.GUI text stuff equals 100. We could have just updated it that way, right? But in this case, we wanted to show you that you can turn text into a integer, into a number. Okay, so we keep going down, and now let's figure out what exactly is happening when the player touches the enemies. Okay, so we have these little enemy guys over here. You can click on them wherever you want, and you can see that the box collider on them is set to be a trigger. So is trigger yes, you check it. Okay, so what we can do with the code is we can come over here and we can say, when you collide with something, because the code is on the player, right? So when the player collides with something other than itself, what is its tag? If the tag is equal to enemy, which it is because we have our bad guys enemy tag, then what we want to do is we want to take the player health variable and subtract 10 to it. So player health minus equals 10 is the same thing as player health equals player health minus 10. And if you remember, player health is our actual health variable that we're keeping control of. Now just to check that, since you might have something that's like 5.3 instead of 10, or something that might do 200% damage, we need to check it. We need to say if the health is less than 0, obviously the game is over, so print game over, but we need to make sure the health is never less than 0. Just for basic stuff, right? Because when you die, you can't have a negative death, a negative 10-point death. It's always at 0. So if the health for some strange reason is less than or equal to 0, set it to 0. Okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to take that temp scale of the green bar and we're going to actually subtract it by that 10 points, right? Because we have to affect the player health and the green bar at the same time. Okay? Then again, just like with the numbers, we have to change the green bar as well. If it's ever less than 0, we need to keep it 0. Okay? So we always want to make sure we're doing the checks and balances. Now, up here, if you remember, where we turned a string into an integer, we're going to do the opposite. Right? We're going to take a string and text, and we're going to make sure that they work together. We're going to take a number and turn it into a string. So we're going to do the opposite of this. So to take text and turn it to an integer, we have to do int.parse. But to take an integer to text, we have to go to string with parentheses. So what we're going to do is the player health HUD.text, which is up here, right, in the player health HUD. Right, that's our GUI text. It's 100. So we're going to take our health and we're going to turn it into a string so that it understands that it's text. Because remember, text and string are the same thing, okay? So when the level starts, we took this text that was our GUI text of 100, we turned it into a number and projected that as our player health. We could have just done this up here, player health equals 100, but I wanted to show you an extra way to do it. So then as you're getting hit by these enemies, that number is changing. So down here we're taking that number, and again this is only when you get hit by an enemy. We're going to take that number, convert it to a string, and then put that in the text up here inside that GUI text, okay? So the text to integer, integer to text is a bit complicated, but once you figure out that once you have this code .toString in the parentheses and the int.parse parentheses, it makes it pretty easy. And then you have to just remember strings are text and integers are numbers. Okay, and it makes it slightly simple. So let's go through it real quick. We set up our variable for our health. We created open slots for all the GUI text and GUI textures. We set a temporary scale variable for the green bar. We set up the enemy damage that we want to do. And we say, as long as you're not dead, update the HUD. If you are dead, hide the green part, make it black. But don't go 0 because we want to, or don't destroy it because we want to add more to it. When the level starts, make sure your text is at 100, but you have to convert it to a number for that to work. And then every time you hit something, if it was an enemy and you're still alive, subtract 10 from the numbers and subtract 10 from the green bar. And then if you're dead, game over and whatnot, right? So always keep track of that. And this is just one way to do it. And have fun with that. Let's take one more look though. So when you push play, we have it set to where the screen size adjusts vertically and horizontally based on our needs. And then when we play the level, when we hit these guys, the numbers change, the green bar changes, and when we're hurt it goes to yellow, and when we're close to dying it goes to red, and then when we die it goes to 0 and the red disappears. Alright, so good luck and enjoy.